Major Guevara, in your speech to the General Assembly day before yesterday, you accused the United States of helping Cuba's neighbors prepare new aggression against her. We, in turn, have often accused your government of abetting subversion in other Latin American countries. Do you see any way out of this situation, any way to improve relations?
I think with regards to solutions, there are solutions, and I think there is only one. We have said repeatedly to the government of the U.S. that we do not want anything but to forget us, that they do not consider us even for good or evil.
Welcome to Bite-Sized Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bite-Sized Bios, BSB. I am your host here, Richard Dix. This is episode number 39 here. Welcome. If it's your first time, welcome. If it's not your first time, also welcome. We talk about people in history here. We try to give you the elevator pitch of why they're important to history. We've covered a lot of different people over what has been, I think, about a year now. We've been doing this specific actual, I guess, addendum or accompaniment to the actual HDTH. Started back, I think, last October. This is now our 39th episode, and what we've been doing now, if you've been listening, is these episodes have been going with the 40s to 70s series that have been covering with the normal podcast, the mother podcast, I guess, if you can say. I'm not sure. And so that's been going. We've been doing that for about 3 months now, and it's been helping. I think it's been nice to have a guidance, even for both. You know what I mean? So I don't think we would have covered Che Guevara now or anytime soon if it wasn't for the fact that his life occurred during the time frame that we're covering. And we'll find out a lot about him. Very interesting person. I didn't know much about him before this. He has to do with a lot of the things that we've already kind of covered as well. He was there during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Bay of Pigs, all of that stuff. He's a very integral part of the Cuban Revolution. But of course, before we get down to old Che, and I'll tell you why his name is Che, we have to talk about the last episode, because of course this is the mini episode of How Did That Happen? So our last episode was one that kind of came out of nowhere, was not on the books, wasn't something that I was expecting to do. I just kind of fell into a pool of research and wanted to share it with you guys. Of course, what I'm referring to is, of course, the Israel-Hamas conflict that kicked off on October the 7th of this month, which started with, the Hamas fighters paragliding into that music festival and killing 1,400 Israeli civilians and citizens over the next day or so, and taking 200 hostages. And now, we are at this point of recording. I think when I first recorded it was about 2 weeks ago. This is October 27th when I'm recording this now. They're saying they think they've killed almost 7,000 Palestinians in Gaza. And so I wanted to, when I was watching all of that stuff go down, like I said in the previous episode, I wanted to just figure out what was going on. I wanted to figure out how, literally, as the podcast asks, how did this happen? Or how did that happen? How did we get here? Is a question that I don't think was being asked enough, even still now. How did we get here? And so that was kind of the focus and the foundation for that podcast. I think we covered a lot. I don't think there's a lot especially because there's going to be a part 2, and there is. I know, and I kind of at the end of the last episode I'd said, it's going to be next week. I think, because I was just thinking, because in the moment I didn't know, because when I started recording the podcast, I didn't think it was going to be a part. I didn't think it was going to be a 2-part series. I thought I was just going to get it all in, truthfully. But what I found myself was, I don't know, kind of glossing over certain topics that I just felt like, in this long form format, we should really be laying out and kind of fleshing out. So I thought, okay, well, and it's probably fatigue from, going at it, for whatever time that it was. So I was like, all right, well, let's just stop it. We have the ability to do that. So let's just do that. So there will be part 2 coming next week, guys. And it will cover up through this, this actual series that we're in the 40s to 70s, because what is, I think, one of the most important parts of even what's happening now is what happened during that time. It's what happened in 1947 and 1948 and in 1967. There are very important pieces to the puzzle that get put in during that time. So we're going to cover those things extensively next week. But for this week, this past week, I thought it was good to kind of just get the foundation laid out there, get the building blocks in there to talk about the Ottoman Empire, and where that kind of plays in that how that turns into British mandated Palestine with the Ottoman Empire losing in World War I. yeah, and it's been good. I thought it was a good episode. So I don't think there's much else to say really. But what is important, I mentioned in the last episode that the podcast now has a TikTok. TikTok is doing pretty good. Hope you guys go over and check it out. It's at HTTHappen22. What I'm doing over there is a little bit different than what I've really ever done with anything with this pod. Is I'm starting to put some visuals with the audio here. Not specifically what I'm saying right now, because this is of course the intros and the outros are not really too much part of the podcast themselves. But the middle parts where we actually talk about the things that happen. There'll be visuals with those. I'm starting to record more promos that go with the visuals, and so trying to just get the word out there, so people know what happens here, what goes on. And the response has been pretty well, but I just want to say it here in case no one actually knew that before. It is one of the new social medias for this podcast that we're using. We are also on Instagram, HTT Happen for that. Everything else besides TikTok is at HTT Happen. Someone already had it, I guess, somehow at TikTok. I don't know who that person is. But yeah, and of course the website is htthappen.com. I've been trying to, like I said, flesh out the work site. Is if you go there are a lot of videos that you can see that show what I was able, like where I got the stuff. It shows you the where the videos and the information. I'm not just pulling the stuff from thin air. You don't have to always read it if you're not if you're less of a reader, more of a visual person. The videos are there. I would recommend checking them out because I deep dive to try to find some really good information. And I think I can't always bring it all here. It's not always going to show up all here, but if you're interested in what you're finding here, I would say go check that out. And of course, like I said, that's htthappen.com. We are on, I think, all the different podcast networks. Just got all the Spotify stuff recently updated. Hope that is working for all you people out there. But yeah, I don't think there's much else to say before we get on. Give us 5 stars wherever you find this. And wherever you find this podcast, if you loved it, if you didn't love it, give us 2 stars because constructive criticism is always welcome. But yeah, I don't think there's much else to say before we get on with the pod. So without further ado, as we know what to do, here is the episode.
¿Me pregunta?
Sí, sí.
No, ojalá todos los peligros fueran como ese.
No es muy peligroso.
Yo desearía que todos los peligros fueran como ese, digo. Porque no, eso no tiene...
Ernesto Guevara was born to Ernesto Guevara Lynch and Celia de la Serna y Ilsa on 14 June 1928 in Rosario, Argentina. Although the legal name of his birth certificate was Ernesto Guevara, his name sometimes appears with the de la Serna and or Lynch accompanying it. He was the eldest of 5 kids, born into an upper middle class Argentine family. His family was a mixture of Spanish and Irish, which is interesting to me. I never realized that he was anything but Hispanic. He actually had at least probably 20 to 30% of him was Irish, European. Two notable ancestors of him was a man named Luis, or I guess a man, right? His middle name is Maria. Luis Maria Peralta. Let's check. Let's just go into it. Let's see. Spanish-born ranchero, yada yada yada. Moved to the Bay Area. Yeah, guy. He's a guy. Okay, moving on. So that's one of his 18th century ancestors, and there was also a guy named Patrick Lynch who immigrated from Ireland to the Rio de Plata Governorate. You know how I do with these words. So that's how the Irish part of him got to the South America. Che was said to be very fond of his Irish heritage. This was according to an Irish actress. I don't know how much she knows, but she would say, quote, Che would talk about Ireland and all the guerrilla warfare that had taken place there, end quote. So he was really big into it. Said he learned a lot of it from his grandmother, who I assume was from the Irish side. He was a really studious guy, really athletic. Did all the stuff that a normal, up and coming child teen would do during the time. He had asthma, but he would play golf, swim, football. Liked to cycle. He played rugby, but he ended up going to medical school. I don't know how. I just knocked down some pens. I guess you heard that. But he would end up going to medical school, and that was something that I didn't know because I don't know much about Che Guevara, Ernesto Guevara. All I know, really, I mean, I've read his biography years ago, but it's all gone from my memory. To the fact that learning that he was a doctor wasn't interesting to me. I did not. It was a little bit of a light bulb there. So he would go to medical school. He would go to the University of Buenos Aires, right, to study medicine. He would go there for a couple years and then take a leave of absence. He was one of those guys. Right, so in 1950, he would take some time off from school to go on a 4,500 kilometer solo trip through the rural provinces of northern Argentina. He wanted to see the world on a bicycle in which he had installed a small engine. Right? He then spent the next 6 months working as a nurse at sea on Argentina's merchant marine freighters and oil tankers. He would do this again in 1951, but this time he had a friend with him, I believe. It was a 9-month, 8,000-kilometer continental motorcycle trek through parts of South America. Now, it was interesting because this is what really does, in a cliche way, open his eyes. He was really kind of, I wouldn't say he was drinking the Kool-Aid so much, so to speak, but, he grew up in Argentina. He hadn't seen other parts of South America. He had now gotten to the point where he'd had a little bit of an education, but he's seeing is the imperialism that's taking over South America, and it's not sitting well with him. It really is. These trips are what kind of light the fire for his revolutionary future, if you will, because he would see all across the continent, that the Spanish, the brown people were being, were losing out to a lot of, be it European or American powers for their land and different things like that. So it was, when he came back from those trips, a changed man. What I didn't know, like I said before, I thought he didn't finish school. He actually finished school. I believe he graduated in 1953. Yeah, he received his medical degree in June of 1953, but then he would start traveling. He would end up being in Guatemala, where he would witness the overthrow of reformist President Jacobo Arbenz by a CIA-backed military coup. And so he would be around a lot of the big players during this time. He would end up actually meeting Fidel Castro in Mexico, and they would end up, I think, going back to Cuba. I'm not sure how that's going to fit into his actual timeline for what we're saying here, so I kind of wanted to get it in there before we end up ending this without mentioning that. But back to the Arbenz in Guatemala. Seeing this was actually one of the things that kind of cemented the hatred for the United States for him in his head, knowing that it was CIA backing that actually ended up overthrowing the president. By that time he had started to enjoy communism. He was started to believe that Marxism and the Soviet Union kind of had the best idea about how to run a society. He ended up marrying a woman from Guatemala. Evidently, this trip to Guatemala was a big deal for him. This woman's name was Hilda. He married a woman from Guatemala named Hilda. And he intended, though I don't think this ever came to pass, to name his first son Vladimir. He was really in it. This guy was USSR. He loved it. And this is about the time that he meets Fidel Castro. This is about like 1955, right? So our man Che is what, 22, right? Born in 28. It's 55. He's 27. Let's get that math right. Yeah, so he's 27. Yeah, he meets Castro and his brother. Really likes what they're talking about. He's loving their whole commie talk, revolution. But I mean, what they do say, and another thing that he took away from those trips when he was out touring, because he would end up even coming to America during those trips. He would hit like all of South America, all the way up Central Mexico. He went to Miami, which is the only part of America that he went to, but he did go to Miami. And what he saw was, I think he saw the Latin American people united as one in his mind. That was his, I think, overall goal, was to unite the entire Latin American society, people, all the countries under communism, I think was what he was trying to do. Because he, was not a fan of capitalism. He wasn't a fan of America, and really liked what he saw going on in Russia. So he and Fidel go back to Cuba, and they do this on a yacht that's called, if I'm wrong, it's called Grandma, right? The yacht's called Grandma. It's Granma. Maybe it's Grandma, but I was like, they go back to Cuba on a yacht called Grandma. And I keep looking at it. I'm wondering if it's not pronounced that way, but it just is, I guess. If I'm wrong, let me know. Someone please. But so 82 guys, right? They get together, these guys, they're going back, they're taking Cuba, right? That's their plan. They're going from Mexico to Cuba on this yacht named Grandma. When they get there, that doesn't really happen. They end up losing like 80% of the people that went. Like, they end only 12 people. Like, literally, when Che goes to this thing, he's only supposed to be a doctor, because he is a doctor. So he's like their medic, right? But they end up only with 12. They lose 60 people. Of the 82 guys that were puttering away on Grandma, coming across that body of water, 60 of them perished. So they're left with 12. That is when, around the time that Che becomes second in command. Cue the beret. Cue the stern look, right? Looking off. That's on everybody's t-shirts and binders and coffee mugs. This is where we get that Che. And while we're at it, let's talk about why his name is Che and not Ernesto. But first off, his name is Ernesto, but his nickname is Che. And this is because in Argentina, it's very usual to use that term, that word che, as a filler between your words. I think it's something like, something like okay, or something like hey. Let me look it up. Yeah, it means something like hey, but I mean, it's just kind of, I think it's similar to how people will probably say like, or something like that, or what I'm saying, or something like that, I imagine. But he said it so much. That the people around him, the Cubans and the Mexicans, they were like, hey, wow, that's not Ernesto, that's Che. The guy says Che, the guy that says Che 50 times for every sentence, that's Che. So that's how we get Che Guevara, right? So we have come back now on Grandma, right? And we are in Cuba. Only 12 left. But they end up building their army back up. And long story short, we haven't really covered this too much, but, they end up taking over Cuba. Fulgencio Batista, he dips out, goes to the Dominican Republic, and basically, the Fidel Castro takes over Cuba. And so this is also the time around when we also find out about some of the bad things that Che Guevara did. Now, it's not, you could all look at it, it's all about perspective. I mean, I guess, I don't know if I'm trying to be as open-minded as possible. We are talking about what I would consider murder, but some people don't. He was known for being somewhat of the enforcer. He would shoot the deserters, people who would not with the people, with the people who weren't down with the cause, I guess, if you could say. And he would, shoot people who were being traitors to the cause. Maybe you're not leaving, but you're maybe giving secrets. He would kill a lot of people, I guess, throughout that time. And I don't know. I think I don't. And then why I say it's all about perspective is you're leading a revolution, so I don't know. I feel like people in revolutions historically have always died. So it's not, to me, it paints him in such a, I don't know. He is definitely a nuanced figure, and there are a lot of people who say that we can't even truly know how to feel about him for years and years until after all the people who have ever really come into contact with him are deceased and gone, and everyone that loves them is around is gone. Because, and I didn't think it, because I watched some documentaries. Some of the people that knew him are very much still alive, because it was a long time ago. It was like 60 years ago, but some of these people, they were like 20 when they were doing all this stuff, 25, now they're just 85-year-old people. They were still much. So it's hard to have a full retrospect and look back and understand the positive and negative aspects of this person without, I think, a little more time to pass. So once Castro and Che have taken over Cuba, they got it now, right? What they realize is that they both kind of have different ideas about how they want to run it, or what should be done, and what their vision is for the future, what's next. What they find is Castro is he's much more, I would say, power obsessed. He's much more focused on how much he can control, whereas Che really has this idea of, like I was saying, uniting the entire of Latin America under like communism. He wants to see a revolution all across of all the different Latin countries, and so it really does kind of they clash for a while. I mean, they were cool to begin with, but eventually Castro's like, man, you're doing too much. You kind of like we're gonna send you somewhere else. So he sends him to fight off, and he basically lets him do what he wants to do, fight these wars. He goes to do these different revolutions. He goes to Africa. He fights in the Republic of the Congo. Right after the Congo gains its independence from Belgium, does not work very well, and this was for a number of reasons. I watched a very good documentary, which I do believe will be on the Works Cited, and it was, and it's interesting. It really is interesting with these documentaries to watch because I watch them all. I'll read subtitles. I don't mind if you have a crazy accent. Like I watched, like with this one, it was an African guy with a very thick accent, but he was explaining why it didn't work for Che Guevara in his revolution. Like he said it had a lot to do with the spirituality of the soldiers he was trying to control, and also with the fact that they came in there. This was wild. They came in there with black Cubans. When they sent Castro, or not, when they sent Guevara to the Congo, they sent him with black Cubans. Like, if you know Cuban, just like any race of any kind of people, they range from light to dark. They took the dark ones, right? So that no one will be alarmed and be like, oh, there's a bunch of Cubans helping with this revolution. So first off, that rubbed all the other Africans, like they didn't like that. And then there were these spiritual issues of like digging holes, and where they in the trenches. They said he was trying to, I guess, do some sort of trench warfare, and the African people there only see trenches as a place to put dead people, so they wouldn't do it. So there's a lot of back and forth of them not respecting him, thinking that he doesn't respect them. A lot of stuff. So basically, I'll say all that to say that didn't work out, and we're getting close to the end of Che Guevara. So what he would end up doing, he would end up going to I think it was the Czech Republic. I don't know if it was Czechoslovakia at the time or Czech Republic, but he would go over there and plan his next revolution, which would be in Bolivia. And this would prove to be, I guess, not the greatest choice. He would go there and end up getting killed in that revolution by a CIA-backed regime. Basically, the CIA has something to do with killing him as well. And he was shot. He was shot by this guy. It was a really interesting story. I mean, it's funny. It's the guy that shot him volunteered to shoot him when he was half drunk and angry because I guess previously I guess I'm jumping the gun here because the way that Che died, he had been captured. So he was being held basically prisoner by the opposing forces. And so the people that he was with, the guy who volunteered to shoot him, a couple of days before that, Che's revolutionary people had been fighting against him, and they killed all his buddies. But what I found to be interesting, and death is never funny, but all of them were named Mario. All 3 of them were named Mario, and they put that in there, and I just thought that was hilarious. But he gets shot like 9 times. This guy shoots him 9 times, and they choose not to shoot him in the head because they're trying to. I guess initially they were going to lie. I don't know if that's because we all know what happened now, but they were going to say he died during combat, and so they had the story. They were going to draw up the story and whatever, so they didn't want to shoot him in the head, which I guess was customary during that time. But yeah, he would get shot all throughout the chest, the legs, all that good stuff. There's pictures of him, of his actual dead body, which I'm not sure which I'll put up on the website or not. Not really sure this time, but yeah, I mean that is Che. He would end up, he would die and become a symbol of resistance all across the world. And they say that truly was, when you talk about the differences between him and Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro wanted power, right? And Che Guevara wanted people to be able to he wanted the oppressed people to be able to overcome, right, and become independent. That was his whole thing. That's why, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, people say that, and I think there is a little bit of truth to it, that that Castro sent him off because they were having issues because they didn't see eye to eye. But I do think that also that was what Che was here to do. He was here to go around and try to help people fight. I mean, he was basically just a traveling revolutionary, if you think about it. He traveled the world to help people try to overcome their oppressor. And so that's Che Guevara. All right, so that was Che Guevara. Ernesto, right? Learned a lot about this guy. Really cool. Very, very complex individual. I mean, the fact that this man is a doctor and 30% Irish alone is just something that I did not think or know, even when you look at him. It's not something that I feel like is taught or talked about. I don't even feel like we talk about Che Guevara very much in school. I feel like he's literally a sentence in like actual like history books. But you see him on people's shirts, you see him on, posters and stickers and everything. And I feel like literally probably 95 to 97% of people who have anything about him know nothing about him. And I used to be one of those people, and I basically still am, because I only did a 25-minute podcast, so I can't know that much. But yeah, hope you guys liked it. I don't think there's much else to say here. We're going to go ahead and go into the next week. We're going to be doing a part 2 for the Israel-Hamas conflict. We're going to cover the back half of the, part that I feel like is, I don't know if it's the back half, but it's definitely, we're going to cover the 40s, the 50s, and the 70s of kind of what's going on, and where I'm going to make a choice at that point if afterwards I want to go forward and continue to cover, because I really do want to break it down. I mean, if we're going to do this, and that's what this, this podcast is here for, why not? I mean, take, the lead, and then try to figure some things out. But we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. As always, I appreciate you guys for pressing play week to week. Give this podcast 5 stars wherever you find it, if you could. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, give us 2 stars. Tell us why you didn't like it, because constructive criticism is always welcome, as we say here. Like I said, thank you for pressing play, and I'll see you guys next week with the next How Did That Happen?